Happy Tuesday, everybody. Clint Skutchan, T360, and another edition of Organized Real Estate. Going to talk about the Lockbox environment, which will probably bleed over a little bit into conversations around showing services as well. And so excited to be back with you. It's been a while. Everybody's really been digging in, and I think most have seen everything picking up. All the energy that's happening in the world today is kind of cool. If you're out and about, I've been traveling now for about 3 months, and you can just feel the change. People are getting so much more comfortable, and I think enjoying being around people. So good stuff. So glad you could make some time here to join us still in the little virtual world. Happy to be joined today by a good contingent of folks from MasterLock. I'm sure you know their name and their brand, but we'll talk today and I'm excited to kind of hear their outside of industry kind of perspective on us as a residential real estate industry, and in particular organized real estate. I think sometimes you learn from those who aren't necessarily as entrenched as we've all become as association and MLS folks. I'm going to go around the room, have you introduce yourselves, and I think I would want you to answer this one basic question for me along with introducing yourself. Have you ever shot a MasterLock lock? I mean, is that like field, like do you have to do that? And I know it says John, but I know him as Bart. So Bart, I'll have you kick it off, and then we'll go around the room here.
Sure. I'm John Bartucci. I go by Bart. We started our business about 10 years ago, this connected products business. And so this is a real pleasure for us to be able to be with you today to talk about kind of our entry with this system into this space. And so I'm looking forward to the next hour with you, Clint. I have not shot a MasterLock lock. And we actually do, we have that lock, we have that shotgun in our archives here.
Oh, that's cool.
Certainly with the electronic ones, we'd love to do that. If we can just get take it out to a range and go do that. But
yeah, I'm curious. You think you guys are confident in your locks. Yeah, would you be able to do that to the electronic one?
Right. I think we can. Yes.
Awesome. Barron, let's go to you next.
Good afternoon and good morning to everybody. I'm Barron Robertson. I'm the director of product marketing for the security group here at MasterLock. And while we have plenty of our padlocks here around the building that have been shot, and a lot of us have them on our desks, I have to say I have not personally done it yet. Although it'd be a lot of fun, I'd be afraid to do it in front of a group of people because I'm pretty sure I would miss.
Right. Yeah. The problem with that is you actually have to be accurate with your ability to shoot, right?
That's right.
Kevin, last but not least.
Yeah, I think I fall with Barron on that too. I'd be much more secure in the lock's ability to withstand it and less secure in my ability to shoot it. I'm Kevin Anderson, and I manage our product development and marketing groups in the connected product team under Bart there.
So you all have mentioned connected products. Maybe let's start there just to give some context. When we say connected products and getting beyond the iconic view, and I think what everybody does think of immediately with the MasterLock, but talk to us a little bit about this evolution and where you're at, and then we'll jump into kind of some industry kind of takes here first. And whoever wants to grab that one, go for it. You're muted, John. Way to go. First person to break the seal on that one.
You think after a year of this, to have this down. Yeah. We started the business in this business about 10 years ago. Our CEO really had a vision for, and back then we were a 90-year-old company in 2011. His vision was to move us into the next century and really pave a way for digital products and digital platforms. And so we began that process, and along the way we've developed quite a portfolio of patents in access control, as well as different kinds of designs for different mechanical capabilities, and then a nice software portfolio as well. So in our space, MasterLock's a big brand. It's globally known. We cover a number of different industries with our solutions. The benefit of that is that it gives us perspective on what other industries are doing with our products. It's actually amazing for us as we built this system and started connecting things. We actually started to learn how people actually use locks and how frequently they open them and so forth. After when we launched this particular system 5 years ago now, we actually learned for the first time how locks were being used, how lock boxes were being used, frequency of openings, things like that. Very insightful for us. And that's all, a big part of being a part of the IoT is really collecting that data and learning. So we gain benefits from seeing what other industries are doing, and we can apply kind of the best of the best solutions as we see fit relative to what we're bringing to market. Real estate is certainly an interesting area for us, and it's an area that we're focusing on.
Yep. Give us a quick example of what are some of those other industries where this technology has been applied, just for context, because that intelligence piece that you're talking about, I mean, we're going from, there's the basic security that we almost now assume is there to the intelligence that comes with it. But what are some of the other areas then that you're kind of bringing to now the real estate space with your intelligence that you've gained there?
Sure. Keep going, or Kevin or Barron, do you want to jump in?
Happy to. Yeah. Part of the exciting thing that we really see is the breadth of industries, and real estate's really one of the ones that we are most excited about. But we really span the spectrum of heavy industry, all the way from really remote cell tower locations that are in a very difficult and rugged environment where we have to be able to offer a secure and dependable solution, to kind of more mainstream college campuses, medical campuses, manufacturing facilities, again, where reliability is an important element, but also understanding how human behavior and interaction work, so we can make sure that our interfaces really satisfy the needs of how people are working with locks, so that we can ensure accountability, but also security and ease of use, because those all go hand in hand with one another.
Should we feel better about the fact that real estate agents will be able to use your lock boxes because college students have figured it out, or should we be concerned actually about that? I'm not sure.
I think a little bit of both.
A little bit of both. Cool. Well, that helps. So let's talk about this. And I kind of wanted to start here. What has been your experience, trying to enter into this residential real estate space? Because you like you said, you've seen a number of different industries and how they function. And, I think many of us really cherish and genuinely love what we do and love being a part of this industry. But we also know there's some nuances and quirks to this industry. And Kevin, maybe I'll start with you on this one. What were kind of some of those initial takeaways where you're like, wow, we thought we knew this space, but once we're here, it's a bit different than what we've seen elsewhere?
Yeah, I think it. So as a company, prior to even the connected products, we have a long line and a long history with our lock boxes. So we took our educations from there and continued to scale them as we entered the connected products, the Bluetooth lock boxes market. And I think we took a lot of that knowledge and have been applying it. But as we have moved in with these connected padlocks and lock boxes, there's been a lot more to learn. Some of that, I guess, one of them that kind of right off the top got us was the long-term commitment and contract required. Somebody brought this up earlier that, what in life do you sign 7-year contract for? Anything. Your house is the closest thing to that. Everything else is, cars even fall short, even with 6-year contracts these days. And then the amount of money that's kind of involved in that as well. It is potentially one of the largest single cash outlays for an association of realtors or an MLS. And, for something that is so important to how real estate works, but isn't top of mind, it amazed us that, it is such a expensive and long-term commitment. So yeah, that was one of the first ones we got, and I'll,
let me follow up on that one. Let me follow up on that's interesting. Are there other areas where the utilization of locks have been so heavily monetized by entities? That's an interesting point that you bring up. Do you have other industries where you pay for access and security and all of that, or are we kind of unique in that way?
Certainly, I think we see across a broad spectrum, access is an important part of operations and has been monetized. But I think really what was kind of surprising to us was the outsized scale of the cost versus where technology has been going and the ability to gain access. Where usually, we see that as a service that's really a very small part of the overall operations of a particular industry. It really has an outsized impact here. And one of the things that we really try to remind ourselves, and this is difficult because I'm the physical product guy, so I love my lock boxes. But at the end of the day, I don't think anybody else on this call does, and they don't want to spend time thinking about lock boxes. Really, we're just a bridge that gets someone into a property so they can do what they're really trying to do, which is sell it. And if our product were to disappear into the background and become almost invisible, we would be really doing our job well. And we see that in other industries as well, where we try to be as unobtrusive as possible and try to streamline operations so that we are cost effective in what we're offering. So, kind of circling back to the original question that you asked, we see other examples, but we're really surprised at the outsized influence and impact that lockboxes seem to have for associations and MLSs, and then downscale to the individual agents as a result of that.
Interesting. John, similar takeaways for you, John, or kind of insights, from having worked with other industries entering in here? What have you seen as the differences?
Coming from a technology background, it's a different set of customers, that they tend to embrace technology and want to see more of it. They want to see your roadmap. They're excited to engage with you, and they're basically investing in you because of the technology and the roadmap that you're building. Interestingly for us, at least my observation, it was that even with our big brand, it was still hard to get a seat at the table, to actually have folks listen and see that what we've built. And so it took a while to kind of hammer away at that, and Barron and Kevin were a big part of that. Once we started to get a few listeners, it was easier to say, hey, you know what? We've actually been around for 20 years. We've been in this business with our mechanical lock boxes, primarily as secondary, uses for contractors and inspectors and things like that. But now we have this electronic system, and to Barron's point, yes, we're proud of the lockbox and its capabilities. We're even prouder of the software platform that's designed with simplicity and intuitiveness. And to give you really what we're hearing from other industries really is the operational efficiencies that we've been able to gain for them using our system. Anywhere from using a digital key to different codes, to temporary codes, to the audit trail. Many companies are starting to rewrite their operations manuals around the system so that they gain those efficiencies. So it's been kind of interesting to, whereas in a former life, you could always get a conversation with somebody to talk about technology and talk about where you're going. Here, kind of found it a little bit more challenging to kind of just get an ear, and but with persistence, and I think things are starting to open up. Technology is certainly playing a big part in this industry. Over the last few years, and more in particular recently, we're seeing a lot of different prop tech starting to show up, and so people change, technologies change, industries change. It's definitely a time of change, and perhaps a new era in an industry that I think has been, at least from my perspective, a little bit closed off for a while, and maybe ready to embrace some new technologies, new capabilities.
Thanks again to those who are tuning in and joining us today. We do have the chat or question and answer. If you do have questions for these guys or myself, feel free to throw out questions, and we'll be sure to touch on those. You've hit on a couple of things here. One, Kevin, I think you started, was the duration of these contracts. We have we've got an initial survey kind of in the field right now, doing gathering insights on showing services and lockboxes, again, because we see those two becoming more and more integrated over time. But one of the things that was pretty interesting is that 92% of those who responded to the survey so far have been with their lockbox provider for more than 6 years. I mean, that is a huge chunk of time. So do you think that piece contributes to what you had just talked about, John? This, well, we don't have to listen, it's locked up, it's locked down for 7 years. Do you think that duration of time being something that's different that you're seeing here versus others does kind of stymie people being open to conversations around advancements or different options, or even, like I said, giving people choice? Because I'll talk about that in a moment. Like, we really don't give folks choice in lockbox arena, and we really hadn't around showings, and now all of a sudden some market changes, and all of a sudden it's become an important thing. So that's something that's different for you all, right? Like, there's idea of duration of relationship and exclusivity of relationship. Is that a fair assessment of what you're saying, that this is a little different in this game than what you see elsewhere?
Yeah, from my perspective, I think that when you make that decision to go with certain providers, certain suppliers, certain partners for that period of time, you practically go on autopilot. And again, I'm surmising. I'm not, I have no idea, but that's kind of what I see. Whereas, and it's an industry where you're selling property, and so there's a certain set of things you have to do. There's a certain set of steps that have to be followed. There's certain sets of people that get involved, over the course of either listing the house and then getting it sold, and vice versa when you're trying to buy the house. In technology is always changing, but that pace is actually increasing, as we've seen, right? So. I'll go back to the telecom days. Early cellular, you had 1G around for like 10 years. And then you had 2G coming in at about, the mid 90s, and it lasted until about the mid 2000s, early 2000s. And then 3G came along in the early 2000s, but by the end of the 2000s, we were into 4G. And now 4G's, been expanded for a period of time. Now we're into 5G. And the capabilities that we have seen over that period of time are astounding. In a 30-year period, to go from first generation to fifth generation cellular broadband networking is astounding with what we can do. And so, I think leaders in those industries are constantly looking at what's the next thing? What do I have to do to be competitive in order to fulfill, our mission? In the same way in real estate, there are so many things that have to happen to transact a deal. It's certainly ripe for opportunities to embrace technology. And so if you start to think about it in the 5th year of your 6-year contract, you're already too late. You really need to be thinking about, in your 2nd year, what decisions do I need to make a few years from now in order to be ready by the time that contract ends to embrace the new thing, right? So it's a constant, renewal of what you're trying to do. And as the pace of technology increases, those decisions have to be, commensurate with that pace. And so the long-term contract, it locks you in for a period of time where you really can't take advantage of some of these new technologies. But on the other hand, it does give you the time to actually think through where you want to go next. And so, I think there's a hybrid here of opportunity to be able to, take advantage of the time, but be able to constantly have conversations so that you're ready to, for the next change that has to take place.
Yeah, and I think we're seeing some of that in terms of the initial results. Again, going back to that survey, I think what we're seeing is a majority of folks that said they would be a little more comfortable in that 2 to 3 year horizon. And to me, that creates that sense of urgency and compels you to be constantly assessing that. And so, yeah, I just think about this as, like you all who, you're not a new entrant, you've been here as you talked about, but moving into the electronic, the intelligent kind of lockbox space, that's a little bit newer. And even, CentralLock, who's been around for a little bit of time, if you think about 7-year durations, really for a new entrant or folks that are going to come in and compete. And to me, I'm a big believer in competition for, stimulates innovation and all those things you were just talking about, John, is that you could be in this space for 20 years. And if people are in 7-year contracts, the turnover rate and the adoption rate, especially if, again, we're only doing one offering, we do one lockbox and that's it, that really limits new entrants and people coming in and being engaged and I think pushing on the envelope. And so this is where we, I think, as decision makers have to really reassess how we structure this. Yes, there's stability. Yes, we understand the need to have security and all those things that go along with this, but are we stifling innovation? And when people right now in this market in particular are asking for intelligence on real world actionable items, those who are going in and out of those lock boxes is about as real time as it gets. And again, this is where the showing services are starting to interlink more and more with the lock boxes themselves, because there's the scheduling of the showing that gives us intelligence, but then there's the actual intelligence of how long were they in there, because someone could expect to be there for an hour. But if they go in and it's not the right place and you're seeing that repetitively, they schedule an hour, but they're only in there 5 minutes. That's real world intelligence. And so I think you started out with this idea that these lock boxes are more than just security items now. They're intelligence gathering. They're telling us what humans are doing and saying. So to me, again, it's interesting. And I don't think there's much thought that's gone into it around the lockbox. There's a lot of conversation around showing the services right now about innovation and learning and data and all that. What's your take on that? And feel free, maybe Barron, you can start. But what's your take on how should we as a real estate industry be thinking about competition and innovation and all those things as it relates to a lockbox that we generally think about? It sits there and it gets people in and out.
Well, I think, some of the themes that we just started down really play very nicely into that question, because there is the opportunity for efficiency. How do we make the job easier for agents so that they can do more in a compressed period of time? And if we can make that process of arriving at a showing, continuing a conversation with a prospective buyer, the client, because that's the selling opportunity. That's when they're forming their first impression about a property, to be able to continue a conversation, access the home without skipping a beat and without missing a step, really enables a better experience for everyone. And so that's what we want to be, is more efficient and really make that process as easy as possible. The other thing is stewardship. As we look at large organizations, at both not-for-profits but also for-profit entities that are looking at how are they best deploying their resources, how are they making use of either their members' money and investments or their own in terms of shareholders, are they deploying capital in the best possible way? And technology really offers a much better cost-effective solution now than it did 7 years ago. And that's where we see this rapid turnover of technology, that we can offer better solutions today than we were able to offer 12 months ago. And 6 months from now, it'll be even that much better as technology continues to cycle. So there's a lot of evolution. And I think, coming back to where we see things going, the ability to have flexibility and pivot and realize efficiencies as they come into the market is really where we're going to see people continue to go.
Kevin, can you touch on that a little bit? Because again, I think some folks are like, yeah, evolution's just a lockbox, man. Like what's really happening there? Can you talk a lot about some of the technologies that go into this and where you again think the industry should be going versus what we've known it as? The combo lockbox that we just push little buttons on, talk about some of the technology advancements. I don't think, again, because it's not top of mind necessarily, and it's not a sexy idea, it's just practical. What do you see coming in terms of the technology that we should be thinking about in the real estate industry?
One of the things, and actually this is, I think, a great time to bring Kevin into the conversation, is, we've got the chips that go into our lock boxes. We've got cloud-based technology that makes sure that we have a reliable system that's going to open, that we have keys to the locks that live on somebody's phone. So if they're out of cell phone range, they can still access the property without missing a beat. And all of those are a big part of the technology, the encryption that we use. We have military grade encryption, so you have a very secure lockbox. But one of the things that people really don't think about as much with technology is the user interface and the interaction. Because if we ignore how people use locks, then they start to use workarounds. And I think for everybody that's on this call, think about how many properties you've seen with multiple lock boxes because somebody doesn't want to use the electronic box. So there's an old mechanical solution that's on the door that has the same code in it that everybody knows that's on 30 other properties. That workaround really, because the working process didn't really embrace how people work with locks, introduced a potential flaw in the system and how that association is planning for access. So what we really do is make sure that our technology has the human element, that we're really focused on the user interface and how people are working. And that really guides a lot of what we do. And Kevin, I just stole a lot of your
thunder. Well, I do want to ask Kevin. I do want to ask Kevin because I'd gotten a question yesterday about the chips. Because it sounds like with the chip shortage that's happening globally, that inside of the lock boxes there are some of these similar chips, and so some folks are unable to fulfill orders, or there's a real concern now again where you wouldn't have thought about, oh well, we need lock boxes. The real issue is getting chips. But could you talk a little bit about that, Kevin? Because that was something that was generally new to me yesterday. I'd heard it globally, but I didn't think about it in context of how it impacts kind of my world.
Yeah, so actually, I want to step back for 1 second and say that all three of us are actually sitting in MasterLock's global headquarters in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And in non-pandemic times, our development teams for our software and our hardware and our entire operations team for MasterLock are in this building. And so we also have teams around the globe, both operational, sales, and so forth. So our supply chain, our planning, our development span the entire globe, but are very focused here at the corporate headquarters. With that, yes, I mean, as everybody I'm sure has seen on TV, as we go from one, first it was toilet paper. Now, we run through a few things that we're running low on for various reasons. And obviously, chips are becoming a big one. And obviously that has impacted some big name companies. And while we're part of a Fortune 500 company, luckily, I think we've done some steps that really help us plan for that. But yeah, every one of these lock boxes has a bunch of electronic components that weren't there before. And so the supply chain gets longer, the planning process, but we put a lot of effort into that for all of our products and have recognized since before we developed these that we had to be very careful in that process and making sure we had a solid supply chain, and our development process and everything took that into account. So there is a significant shortage out in the world of a lot of electronic components, but at least for the time being, we're sitting in a good position, and we continue to plan 6, 9, 12 months out to kind of keep that supply chain rolling. And it's a very important part of what we do.
And if I could jump in on that, we talked about industries changing, companies changing, having to adapt. This is a 100-year-old company. We turned 100 years old this year. The last decade has been spent in a decade of kind of renewing where we're going and really charting a course here in technology. And along the way, there's things that have to change with that, right? And to Kevin's point, it's how you forecast, it's how you do demand planning. We've actually spent a lot of time as a company really investing in data analytics and data analysts and really helping us understand what's going on in the world. And because we have that global perspective, we have tons and tons of information from which to draw upon to give us the best possible scenarios that we can start to do risk mitigation against. And so when it comes to the electronics, this has been a big piece of our planning for the last several years. And so it's unfortunate what's going on with all the chip shortages and so forth right now. We happen to be in a good place for the moment, and really for the foreseeable future, relative to, number one, our inventory, but then two, the planning that we've done for our production over the next 18 months.
I want to stay on the topic of, and it gets to this intelligence and analytics that you just alluded to, Bart. But I think we're just really awakening in the association and MLS space to APIs. I mean, I know this might be, especially for some of the tech folks that are entering in, you're like, oh, we're a lockbox company, and we don't develop on RETs. So you come in and seeing that the real estate world is kind of catching up to this idea of API, and now that we want intelligence not just from the lockbox, but how it relates to the showing and what it, ultimately even tying into the MLS data sets that say, okay, well, if these showed for this long and we're on the market for this long and all these things, this is what we can project and we can learn from all of this. All that's predicated on that information being shareable, right? Mm-hmm. And so being API forward is really, really important. And I know you all, because you do have those technology pieces of, you're coming in ready to go, prepared for integrations and those types of things through your API work. Maybe talk a little bit about that. And again, I would love your perspective on when you come into this space thinking it's so sophisticated, it's well-funded, they should have all these things in place. And then when you get here and it's maybe not there, what that was like.
Yeah, I can kick that off, but then Kevin and Barron can join. And we developed a system years ago that we were very, very successful with across the country in terms of locking up cell towers and things. We pivoted that technology, and when we pivoted, we number one pivoted into the cloud, and that was years ago now. But two, we thoughtfully thought through how are we going to connect with others, right? Because to build a system that's closed, that's very 80s, 70s, 80s, 90s. And
the 220s, if you're in the right industry.
221, right. And so we thought about the system, what was it going to do homogeneously, but then what would others want to be able to do with the system by simply being able to connect into it. And so before we even started that particular design for the system, we thought about how were people going to connect. And so we in parallel built the APIs that go with it. And as we've gone along, especially as we've been working with other industries as well, we've developed kind of a portfolio of APIs that we can leverage to connect to others. We think it's really important because, in the telecom world in the early 90s, it was very closed. There was no sharing, and you had to, when you roamed, you had to pay for that. If you wanted to go across country, you had to call your service provider to actually tell them you're going to be in California and you're from Illinois, and so you need to be able to make phone calls. Today, we know ubiquity because the industry got together and actually talked about how do we need to have interoperability to grow the pie for everybody. Because if you stay in your little corner of the world, there's no growth if you're landlocked by competitors. But by opening up, you get some opportunities there. And so the APIs, that portfolio gives us that opportunity to help, create that openness within the industry.
Kevin, can you talk to that? Yeah, a little bit kind of from the technical side.
Yeah, well, I think it's a bigger picture thing. We've hit on it a number of times in this conversation and others, obviously, that flexibility is key. And especially right now with what's happening with showing services, there's a lot of talk of, well, everybody deserves a choice and there should be options out there. Yet lockboxes tend to be this, let's call it a monopoly, so to speak. And yet, to your point earlier, I feel like it's an important piece of the showing experience, but it is the tiniest piece of that. But when it goes wrong, it has some profound effects. But we really think that there should be the flexibility, not only in the provider of it, but also in the services. It's a dynamic world we live in a dynamic time. Every day I open up Facebook and all of a sudden there's a new showing service or data company promising to give you everything you need to make your real estate experience better, whether it's from the customer side or the realtor side itself. And we want to be a part of all of that in helping get the right data to the right people. And we don't have necessarily favorites. We aren't looking to hold the data. So we are happy to integrate with people. And it is a unique touch point in the showing experience, because whether you're using Bluetooth or a code, it's a point where you have to interact. And as you mentioned earlier, there's data in there that can be very valuable. And we don't necessarily have all the answers of how that's valuable to people. So we want to have other people involved in the entire process. And that could be, we can tell you when the showing started and when the showing ended. That's definitely valuable to your earlier point. If they're out in 5 minutes, probably not the house forum, or it really, really is the house forum.
Right.
But it lets you kind of follow up from there. But so we really believe in having flexibility in payment models, in technology, in integrations with AMS, MLS, other lockbox providers. We also, bring our mechanical.
Can I stop you? Can I stop you there, because we're hearing a lot? And John mentioned this a moment ago: interoperability. And, that means basically similar services, ability to talk to, communicate with, and distill information collectively, right? So if we just surmise it that way. Right now, again, initial survey results, and if those who are on the call who haven't participated, please keep an eye out. We'll keep pushing, and we'll be keeping that open through this week. We'd love for you to participate. But 92% are saying right now they only offer one lockbox solution. And my suspicion is, of those 8% who offer more than one, they're generally speaking to a manual lockbox in combination with their singular electronic lockbox. So there's right now, I would say, almost no opportunity or options for folks in various markets. It's, here's the one the association or MLS has chosen. This is the one we use. The boxes are not compelled to talk to each other whatsoever. So you say you're open to it, but of course you're newer entrant into this space, just as we're hearing some established partners that are in the lockbox space that are now looking at the showing space saying, oh, they need to be interoperable. But how does this become a reality in the lockbox space? And obviously, again, you can come in as a newer entrant and say, yeah, whereas folks maybe are grappling to hold on to a large market share that they have, say, maybe it's not as important. What should we be doing as leaders in the organized real estate space to think this through, whether there is value in interoperability between the lock boxes and what that might look like? I mean, what would our role be in all that? It's one thing to say, oh, you guys go fix that, but what is it that you would see us doing?
Well, I think the system stems from the, way it has been running for decades now. Opening up an organization to having choices and really pushing. We have a lot of great relationships with MLSs, AMSs, showing providers, and we're happy to be part of any discussion and even try to help lead the way. But also some of it has to come from the associations and the MLSs to allow other options out there. And I mean, in all honesty, a lot of them already are. To your point, mechanical lock boxes are out there as well for supplemental needs. And so finding that right fit for that organization and really pushing and bringing more organizations to the table to discuss opportunities and, not signing 7-year contracts.
Can I ask and I don't want to put you guys, I know, because you're trying to develop relationships out of the gate, not harm them, but you mentioned earlier when you said one of the things you notice about this industry that's different than others is that there is a cost, and you said it's outsized versus others. So, I challenge a lot of times my association and MLS folks in terms of, if you're delivering services that are very necessary for those that we serve, but you're extracting revenue from that it's over and above, that's not a general practice we would encourage you to do. We understand margins, the need for income, but is that a part of what might be constraining this conversation, is that there are revenue streams here back to folks that might be a little exorbitant comparatively to what you've seen in other industries?
There are, but ultimately, I don't think that should be a roadblock to change. I think it can be, but it doesn't have to be. There's nothing wrong with associations recovering the cost that they invest in, in training and in deployment of locks and all of the necessary steps that have gone into the traditional way of managing the system. But if we can, as an industry, gain efficiencies there, the costs that need to be covered aren't as great, and that capital can be redeployed as additional services or different services to the membership to a better experience with showing services and lock boxes. There's a lot of creativity that can then come into play. Really, if the cost of the input goes down, that delivers a great amount of flexibility to the association to be a greater value provider membership.
Yeah, and I think, again, get back to this idea of interoperability, choice, and all of that. I do think that there's a growing need for, again, organized real estate to address this, because I'm sure, as you guys know and have been looking into, the Department of Justice, as a part of their updates and some of the things that they're working on with NAR right now, said, look, we've got to open up this lockbox access. You can't use lockbox as a way of excluding access to those who are licensed. And so this is becoming something that I think is going to be a bigger issue. And there's a question again in our survey asking about confidence levels that, the lockbox folks will be able to provide and help them adhere to the DOJ requirements that are coming. And I think most feel pretty confident about that. But the question will be is, okay, what are the systems and the inefficiencies that you just talked about, Barron, that go along with that? What is that? And what does that look like? Because if it becomes something that is so prescriptive and difficult to adhere to, then that sets up barriers, and it also increases potential of getting yourself into some hot water. What and I don't know how you guys address this, but maybe you can speak to that DOJ requirement in the context of, again, a need for more interoperability in the lockbox space to really facilitate and probably, again, streamline and create efficiencies where, because we've worked in an exclusivity kind of approach, we're probably hurting ourselves in ability to be flexible under those circumstances.
Well, I think, and maybe I can kick this off, because I think we can all speak individually to different elements of this, but the flexible system that we initially designed, really just looking for a way to offer an easier way of working. Now it really has helped us to make sure that we've got a very compliant system, so that access can be shared. I think one of the concerns that's going to be out there is, does the DOJ imply a much greater administrative load for an association to bear with some of the current incumbent systems? If you're going to need to hire multiple people to be able to grant access to a lockbox system on a day in, day out system or need, that becomes a real incremental cost that's going to be difficult to manage and not a very user-friendly system. And
you have to demonstrate that value if you start charging those costs and passing those through, because there's going to be eyes on this to say, well, are you recouping costs, or again, are you trying to create additional now financial barriers that, now that we've removed the physical barrier?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think you just hit the nail on the head. And what we've tried to offer is really a systemic solution that is very easy to implement and doesn't stifle the sale of homes, which ultimately is why we're all here.
Again, one more thing kind of on that interoperability, because we're asking that question, how important is interoperability for showing services, that you can now offer multiple showing services and get that data set back and again, ensure security and scheduling and, reduce any sort of frustrations there. And likewise in the lockbox space. And I'll tell you, the interoperability acknowledgement now is incrementally higher than what it is for lockbox. But to me, I don't think you can separate the two as we're looking at greater choice in this space. That to me, the mechanism and the scheduling, whether they're intertwined or elsewise, becomes a conversation that we should be thinking as holistically. And again, there's a lot of political and ownership structure questions going into the showing conversations right now that are driving a lot of energy there. But to me, that energy should be captured and applied holistically to, ultimately, it's not just about scheduling, it's the access that you were talking about. We need to smooth that process. And I'll be intrigued to see if it does get extended out beyond just the showing conversations. Are you hearing, as you're visiting with folks, more interest or questions about, can we offer your product alongside other products? products, and how would they work together? Are you getting any of that energy? And whoever wants to jump on that one, jump in.
Sorry, Kevin and Bart, I don't want to, but I can at least start it up. But absolutely, I mean, we continue to hear, we would really like choice, and frequently what we're hearing is we don't want to prescribe a solution to every one of our members because they've all got different needs and different preferences. We'd like to be able to offer them, a menu of opportunities, and that's one of the things that we've really been trying to incorporate is the ability to have that flexibility and give them that sense of choice, and have it work across multiple, showing services, as you said. It's what people are looking for. They're used to choice these days.
Yeah, more and more so. I know, John, you've been using that example of the cell phones and all those things, but we're down to less choice, necessarily just because of market, and the competition that, you've kind of got two dominant players there, and there's, ancillary folks that are there. Do we think things would change, if this were a little more open, or would you still kind of see folks gravitating towards one or two options that they really like and not 15, I guess is the question, because I think that would be overwhelming and difficult. And one of the things, in the MLS space, when we talk about, primary MLS technologies and front end of choice and all these other things, is that yes, we want to give people choice, but then what's the impact to training and onboarding and maintenance and all those other things. So I think that would be a kind of a counter question to, right now we train on one box. It's easy, if there are issues, we know that the issues, so we can tackle those directly. So what would that look like? And again, maybe Bart, you can speak to kind of some of the other experiences you've seen outside of this industry.
Yeah, history has shown that closed systems work for a period of time, but then it becomes fairly stagnant in terms of growth and innovation. When you start to open things up, it's hard. Change is hard. It's messy in the middle, and then it's fantastic at the end. And these are things that you have to look back in history and realize that that's the case. And so I like the telecom industry because it is so applicable to what this industry looks like today, to me, where things were closed and then it was hard to get things open because people didn't want to change. But in fact, driven by customers, it had to open up, and it became fruitful in so many ways from a feature perspective, from a revenue perspective. It set the table for being able to generate so many more different offerings that exceeded far, far beyond what could be offered before in a closed system. And so here we're talking about, transactions of residential property. And so there's so many opportunities to make that we've talked about the journey of selling a house or buying a house and everything that has to happen in between. Some of it is quite complicated, and it seems unnecessarily so. So
wait, I want to stop you there. Tell me more about that. It's unnecessarily complicated. You're speaking specifically to the real estate.
Yeah, because I just want to buy a house, right? And yet, the average buyer of a house or a seller of a house, they go find an agent, right? And that agent, they've been referred to them by family members or friends, or they see it on a billboard, in their hometown, and they contact them and they get engaged. What they don't understand, and it's been very enlightening to be part of this, is all the things that have to go back that are happening in the background. It never occurred to me as a consumer that I assumed that when an agent put a lockbox on my house, that they had all of their real estate friends in the surrounding areas that had access to that lockbox. Turns out they may or may not have had access to that lockbox for various reasons, right? The DOJ thing says, well, everyone should have access to that. So, and as a seller, I want that because I want my house sold. I don't care how you do it. I just want the house sold. But when there's rules in place that prevent that, now my market opportunity for my sale is now smaller than what it could have been. So the opportunity here is to relook at the business models, as Barron alluded to, from where's the funding flowing, from and through to enable what the current model is today to this more broader open model where, I am going to share access, but you're going to pay me for that too. And there's value there, because it gives you an opportunity to sell more houses and gives, other agents the opportunity to help their customers buy more houses. To me, that's a win-win to open that up. And again, there's a business model there, and in this day and age, there's multiple business models that can be derived from this opportunity.
I purposely wanted to get your insights and kind of thoughts again, on the industry as a whole, so that, those who are watching here can kind of, contextualize, lockbox discussion, one thing, but, larger kind of decision-making another. But I think it is important to probably speak to the lockbox technology that you do have. So you've got the Bluetooth enabled, all those different things, but also then incorporate some of the strengths that you came from, right? Like not only looking at the electronic aspects, but there's still a need for manual entry but for further security around that. So maybe now, as we're kind of wrapping up, a good time to kind of highlight your lockbox solution, how you bring forward some of the things that I think that MasterLock has largely been known for in the real estate space, and now moving it into where you see us the real estate space going.
Sure. And I can kick that off and you guys jump into. We, what our brand stands for is peace of mind, security, at home, at work, and at play. And so living up to that brand in the cyber world is a big deal. We're known for 100 years of building really good products, durable products. In the cyber world, we hired a team that came from technology backgrounds to do what we wanted to do. But to the rest of the company, it's new, and so I would say we practically over-engineered, at least in terms of our time, in thinking through the security of the system. So end-to-end, data at rest and data in transit is in a completely secure environment. Every year, we have outside third-party companies try to hack the system, and they test it for vulnerabilities, and every time you do that, you learn something, right? We've been fortunate now in the last several years where, no vulnerabilities are found. And that's, I think, a testament to our diligence on really building something as secure and tough in the cyber world as it is in the physical world. This is a very important piece to us. We're not MasterLock if we don't provide that security across the entire system, whether it's software, firmware, or the hardware. The APIs, managing the endpoints, every little detail of security is something that we focus on. And I would say in the early years, we focused more on that than the user interface. It was that important to us. Since then, we've got that piece in place, and it's an ongoing now part of our DNA, in terms of managing security vulnerabilities, understanding what's going on in the industry, making sure data is protected, especially as this industry continues to now really grow in its focus on data and how we're going to use that data and how we're going to, really leverage it to create these operational efficiencies and these optimizations and perhaps be able to tune down fees in certain areas and apply them to other areas that ultimately grow the pie for everybody. It's very important. So in this particular space, our system allows you to have a completely secure connection. It allows you to have your digital keys when you're not connected online to the internet. You have primary codes, secondary codes, which can be used for different kinds of entry into the property. And we have temporary codes that expire, so that if somebody doesn't have access to the lockbox on a permanent basis, they can be given a code that actually expires in 4 hours, and you can let them in and do what they need to do. But we have
I think that's
a history
the part
of all of that.
that I really like is because, as you talked about, I think as Barron talked about it earlier, people are going to cheat the system. Like if they don't like it, they're just going to, put the old manual lock over on the propane tank or wherever the heck it is that it's kept. And to his point, jokingly, and I know this from markets that I'm in, there are literally people that know that this is the code and has been the code. And that part, as we're moving more and more into a community where, you need those types of various access points, but you don't want to compromise the security. That to me was one of the cool things, is that you still have, the ability to let, if you've got folks that are, upgrading and improving the house, not only are you able to let buyers into your house, but you can let some folks in, the stagers or whoever else needs to come in and do that securely and outside of the other access points. So I think that's a cool thing if folks haven't seen that in terms of looking at your Lockbox technology. I love the dual application of that, from a standpoint of, I know we have folks that have commercial folks as well that are, at times not running the most secure system. We have a lot of leasing products. So to me, yours, even if folks aren't looking to totally change contracts right now, I think the practicum of you building that smart, intelligent electronic technology while maintaining some of the humanistic aspects of just needing to get in and punch a code is pretty cool.
One of the things that we learned from a different industry is that, so an industry that we were providing a very industrial access control system to get into the gates, all the padlocks, the mechanical padlocks had the same code. So if I'm in a certain region of the country, if I knew one combination, I could get into any gated area. And that kind of was an interesting, twist, that here we are locking up all of this millions of dollars worth of equipment with codes, but to get into the facility, if you knew that the one combination, you got into them all. It became important.
I don't want to put any secrets out there, but if you know my online passwords, you probably know. I'm that guy. But it's convenience, right?
Thing. Exactly.
Yep.
And so we walk the line constantly of good security while providing convenience. This system gives you a lot of flexibility in terms of different kinds of ways of using it in a very secure fashion.
And again, I made this supposition, but I think it's true that you all are, obviously you would love to be the primary lockbox provider for any association or MLS. But as you said, you're open to choice and talking to folks, if they want to build out and test run and get to know your product outside of maybe that 7-year contract type of approach that's been done in the past. Is that something you're open to or you're considering as you're building out in this space?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, actually, and to tack on to that, there's flexibility at multiple levels. So from the user level, we can scale from an individual agent all the way up to an MLS. But also we have scalability in terms of our commercial operations. So we get associations that say, I don't want to be in the distribution business of lockboxes. It's a big overhead.
Yeah, I'm hearing more of. They're just like, and you know what? All things aside, it's too much of a headache. No, we're not going to do it.
Absolutely. And we've got great systems in place to be able to manage that. And on the other end of the spectrum, we've got associations that think that that's core to what they do, and we can plug into their operations. So we try to be as flexible as possible in embracing both ends of that spectrum.
Is it true? There's you could access, if you were one of those that were like hands off, you all make your lockboxes available, but then controllable. So they wouldn't have to be the distribution source. And I always think about the big lockbox change out. I went through one of those when I was association exec. Well, it was great because I got to see members I'd never seen before. Many of them were not happy to be seeing me. So that some of those things are changing and evolving too, right?
That's right.
So it's a little easier to get access.
A number of ways to be able to manage that. But, because of our broad distribution reach, we can develop alternatives. So you don't have to have multiple stores, especially across a dispersed geographic area. We can solve that problem for you. Or, if that is part of what you want to do, and that is core to an association or an MLS, there are ways that we can be a more integrated solution as well. But it's just about having that flexibility baked into our business model.
So we're closing out here. I want to remind folks that are tuning in. We've got currently a showing service and lockbox survey that's in the field, and so if you haven't completed that yet, I think Chris is going to share a link out to you so that you can participate in that. We're leaving that open through the end of the week to finish that out, and then any participants who are interested will be giving you a summary report of what our findings are there. So would love for your participation there. Any other kind of words of wisdom? Again, I've really appreciated the outside perspective on us, as an established entity, one that wants to be an integrated part of this real estate space. Any kind of thoughts or words of wisdom for decision makers as they look at whether it's lockboxes or just approaching technologies in general that you think that you'd want them to know as we head out back into the rest of our day?
Yeah, first of all, we appreciate the time being here, Clint, on this call. It's important, I think, as an industry, as we've seen, there's tumultuous changes happening very, very rapidly here. And I think it'd be very interesting to have some industry level conversation around where's it going to go? What do we want to be? What do we want to offer to the end user who's really the customer that's going to be in the house or the property? And really kind of define what that roadmap looks like. There's so many different technologies in prop tech that are popping up now. And you can't be the kid with the shiny object hopping from one to the other. They're all extremely interesting. But the question is what do you want to be? What does your solution really look like? And that solution really now encompasses multiple different suppliers for different aspects of that customer journey. It's important to understand, what's important to each association and MLS. And where different players fit into that journey.
Kevin, Barron, any last words of wisdom? And Kevin, I'm scared to ask you for words of wisdom, but I might try it anyway.
So for me, again, I'll echo Bart. We appreciate everybody's time, and we're excited to be part of this and continuing our 20 years of tradition. But I do want to say that we all should step back for a second and remember technology is supposed to make life easier and better. And I'm not 100% sure all the technology out there is doing that. One example was what you said earlier, and I think Barron echoed it. The amount of training, the hard process of turning over and all of that, it should not be hard. And if you look at our mechanical boxes as the path to our Bluetooth products, every day realtors, homeowners, property managers are putting those lock boxes and our Bluetooth ones out on buildings, on rental properties, on showings, and they aren't going through hours of training, watching additional videos. So technology should be simple. It should make life better. It should make a profound impact on your daily processes. It should not be a brick wall standing in the middle that is this imposing edifice. So I would
shouldn't
say
be an impassable lock, right?
Exactly. So it's I think it's really important to look at how easy some of that is and how quickly the promise of this technology has in some ways turned into an imposing force. And really it should be making everybody's lives better and easier, from the agents all the way through to the property owners.
Great. Barron, any thoughts from you?
I can't beat that. So I'm just going to say thank you for everyone for your time.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for your candor. And I know I asked you some questions that might have been tough to answer, but to be able to reflect outwardly, I think is so important, because we get so caught up on our internal kind of mechanisms, our systems, our history. We've always done it that way. Perspectives. It's nice to hear from others. So appreciate it. Thank you guys so much. Thanks again to those who tuned in today. We'll get a replay out if you want to share it with others. And again, we'll encourage those who haven't yet taken the survey to do so that we can add to the intelligence out there. So with that, I'm going to sign off. Thanks so much. Go out, enjoy the rest of your day, and we will undoubtedly see you very, very soon. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.